Have you ever wondered why so many fantasy heroines sound the same? Like you could swap their names and nothing else would change. Let's break down why that happens and what it means for the stories we love. Hello, whimsical wanderers, and welcome back to the Whispers of Whimsy. Today, I want to talk about a trend in fantasy and romantasy that I think has gone from exciting to a little exhausting. I'm talking about the badass female main character trope. Now, don't get me wrong, I love strong women in books. I think they're amazing, and this shift was long overdue. But lately, the trope has become so common that a lot of these characters feel almost interchangeable. Like you could swap one for another and the story wouldn't really change. So, what do I mean by a badass female character? Usually, it's a protagonist who's deadly in combat, fiercely independent, emotionally hardened, and morally complicated. And for a while, seeing women in these roles was revolutionary. It gave us a side of female characters we hadn't seen much of in fantasy. But now, the same patterns keep popping up across books, and some of the choices these characters make have started to feel a little unbelievable and very unsympathetic. And I do want to clarify that there have been a lot of badass side characters in fantasies throughout the years, but it's just becoming more known nowadays to have leads to be in this case. Take Saeris in Quicksilver, for example. Early in the story, she steals a golden gauntlet and passes it to her brother, who she states makes poor decisions and is immature, only to have him captured by the guards. She then has to act immediately to save both him and herself. What follows is intense. After a day of getting beaten by guards, scaling walls, and running for her life, not to mention that she survives off of a cup of water a day in her world, she now engages in deadly combat and kills two experienced, well fed guards who I imagine train daily since they're professionals and terrified of their queen. On one hand, it's an impressive display of bravery and skill. On the other hand, the sequence asks a lot of readers to suspend disbelief. Fighting at peak effectiveness under those conditions, being physically exhausted, emotionally strained, and slightly intoxicated, feels almost superhuman. It makes the scene thrilling, but it also highlights a larger issue that I see with this badass FMC trope. These characters are often written as flawless and capable in situations where almost anyone else would falter, and that can start to undermine the realism and the tension in the story. Celaena Sardothien from Throne of Glass offers a similar tension. She's charismatic, deadly, and undeniably iconic in YA fantasy, and I honestly love the first scene of her in the mine, especially hearing her thoughts as she walks down the halls to meet Dorian for the first time. But even Sarah J. Maas's writing sometimes stretches believability. She emerges from prison, malnourished and fatigued, yet she quickly holds her own against her competitors who haven't lost a year of training and experience. Plus, that fight with the trained assassin. Her wit and sass are part of what makes her fun, but there are moments when her arrogance feels more like a personality checkbox than genuine character depth. Watching her fight and maneuver is exhilarating, but there's a constant underlying question: how plausible is it that this teenager in her circumstances could repeatedly survive these scenarios without serious consequences? These examples point to a larger issue that I've noticed in modern fantasy. Too often, the trope presents hyper-competent women who excel in every physical or mental challenge from the start, or who undergoes accelerated training montages and then turns into a master in a matter of weeks. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's exciting, but when it becomes formulaic, it starts to feel as though the authors are relying on a template rather than developing a fully relatable character. The personality aspect can also be problematic. There's a tendency to equate strong with rude, aggressive, and emotionally closed off, essentially translating stereotypical male action hero traits onto a female body. This can be fun occasionally, but when it's used to define every strong woman, it risks making the character hollow. They become interchangeable. Saeris, Celaena, Tori from Zodiac Academy, Diana from Gods and Monsters, and so many more. They all share the same overpowered, emotionally distant energy at key points. Makes it harder for the individual to feel unique or necessary to her own story when someone else could easily replace her. I want to be clear, this isn't a critique of strong female characters themselves, far from it. These characters are necessary, and they challenge the notion that female characters should be passive or secondary or defined by romance. They give us agency and independence and complexity. But now I feel like the pendulum has swung too far. Strength and independence are essential, but without stakes or limitations or moments of true vulnerability, these characters are all the same. And here's the thing I keep noticing: when these characters do show vulnerability, it often shows up in a narrow way, usually tied directly to the male romantic lead, or constructed in a way that feels formulaic rather than human, like they need to have a vulnerability just so that they can be relatable. But there's not a lot of thought given into that vulnerability. What I mean is, some characters will be presented as this unstoppable force in the world until a love interest gets close, and suddenly their emotional arc is all about how this person makes them feel. Their fear and hesitation and self doubt, their emotional openness isn't rooted in the story's stakes or in their personal history. It's triggered primarily by the romance. That pattern shows up again and again in popular books. It's not vulnerability in the sense of grappling with loss or moral conflict or wider emotional complexity. It's vulnerability tied almost exclusively to desire. And what does he think of me? Or why am I acting this way around him? It's why otherwise fierce protagonists can suddenly be reduced to fumbling thoughts or impulsive romantic choices, not because the narrative has given her something deeper to wrestle with, but because the love interest becomes the emotional center of her universe. And when this is about overcoming guilt or loss, it's more annoying than uplifting to me, because when a situation is entirely their fault to begin with because they wanted to prove themselves to be that badass FMC by doing something ridiculously dangerous for the setting. Okay, so how is it that Saeris watches her mother die in the street, has grown up around all of this violence, knows exactly how the world works, and then makes this decision to bring this gauntlet back to where it risks the lives of those who she cares about most? That kind of vulnerability and decision making doesn't make the character feel deeper. It makes her feel shallow and foolish, and that we really just needed the plot to happen and we want to show weakness in a character. What excites me as a reader is watching a strong female character grow into her power. I want to see her struggle, to fail, to learn, and evolve. And I don't mean that I want her to start out as a jerk while judging everyone else for their dishonest or rude moments, and then fall in love and soften somewhat. I want to feel that tension in her victories and understand the cost of her decisions. Not decisions of, I'm going to be tough and I'm going to prove myself, but decisions that people have to face when they are struggling, when they have no other choices, when they want to protect someone they love, not to just enrich themselves. And I don't want her making stupid decisions just so she can appear tough. When every battle is effortless and every plan succeeds, or when every sarcastic quip lands just perfectly, it erodes the realism and the suspense that makes the story compelling. So that's my take. I love badass women in fantasy. I want more of them. But I also want to feel them to feel like real people, not interchangeable versions of the same archetype. Characters like Saeris and Serena are thrilling and iconic, but they also highlight why the badass FMC trope can feel exhausting when it's overused. What do you think? Do you have a favorite badass female character who feels fully earned, and or one who maybe made you roll your eyes? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.